So where would you like me to start? Like the very beginning, the beginning of the world and Big Bang and all that stuff? Or uh, my dad had met my mom here at Kirtland Air Force Base when he was stationed here, when he came here from Alabama. And my mom's from Santa Fe, she's in Ortiz. And they met on a kind of a double date thing and started going out then, really liked each other, got married, had my brother, well, actually my sister, then my brother, then myself. And then we lived here. I lived mostly in South Valley. I lived in Brelis for many, many years. Southeast Heights. Uh, Went to Highland. I was one of the first Highland punks. There was only a couple of guys older than me, Dave Duran from Jerry's Kids, and this other guy, what was his name? Anyway, this other really crazy, weird guy that was, can't remember his name. But then I was class 81 and was like, we were like the first punks in Albuquerque, and all that, except for some friends of mine like Annette Gonzalez. She went to Rio Grande. She was class 79, and Mona 79. And then there was the older people that were more like artists, Rick Sloan, Harry Morris, Terry Corbin, that I hung out with when they were already in their 20s and like late 20s, 30s, even some of them in their 40s. Oh, and then of course the Queen Vicky Hawes, with the worst influence of me ever. Back in the 70s, and when we'd have shows, I don't know if you ever heard of Natural Sounds record store that really started on Harvard by a friend of mine. He was like, he really brought a lot of people together. We'd all hang out at the record store, look through records and stuff, and then we all kind of met through that, and we'd have a lot of just DIY shows, like in just different little spots, including Natural Sound, and the Firefighters Hall was an early place. What else? This is all before the B&M and all that. Even downstairs, like I remember 1979, the Ramones played at the substation, which is downstairs of the Student Union building at UNM. And I was one of the few people that was out there. And I'd been in New York at that time. My brother lived in New York, and I went and stayed with him, and I got the chance to still go to CBGB's when it was still cool, and places like Max's Kansas City, the Mud Club, which is this really creepy, weird place. I went back there in 1984, and things had changed. Then it became all hardcore, moshy crap, Lower East End, lost that New York Ramones, Dead Boys, scene. And so it really changed in just those 5 years. And Albuquerque also had changed. But it's funny because I was out in New York in 84 and I'd meet all these bands. And when I came back, they're here playing in Albuquerque. Hey, I remember you from New York. You were Frenchie and all these guys, And so that was kind of a strange thing to run into those guys there and then run into them here. But yeah, the original scene in Albuquerque was really amazing amalgamation of like artists and musicians and performance artists. You think about like my friend John O'Jones. He was in a band called the Generics, and they had side projects. They did some really bizarre with what's his name? Jamie Sprinkle's one of them, and the other guy's name was Green. And they did these really bizarre films. A lot of people were and some of them were like this guy, their drummer, would be like on the toilet wiping his butt and all this blood would come out. So they were doing those things. They do, some of the guys would, like Judson had a band called the Gross Profits. That was a great thing. They did a show at the X, which is an experimental theater downstairs of the Popejoy Hall complex. And they did this great show where they shaved all their hair off, including their eyebrows and everything else, including Genevieve. And they performed, and they had these big, weird, clunky-looking piñatas out of white plaster But when they'd hit them, they're full of cow guts and they'd splatter all over the place. They made the biggest mess. So now Albuquerque was really this really weird experimental place, late 70s, early 80s. One of the first great kind of sort of hardcore bands, my friend Annette Atomic, we used to call her, and then Mona and Ironhead, who was like this really amazing, strange guy. They had a band called the Wankers, and they would play wherever. One of the best shows was at Natural Sound, like we were talking about, the old one on Harvard, and they they would do things like, I remember one of the lines in one of their songs, "Mary had a little lamb and the lamb died." Those are that kind of stuff. That's what I used to love about the senior is it was very DIY. You didn't have Amazon to buy GBH shirts or anything like that. You sort of either made your own stuff or like my friend Harry Morris used to make these little iron-ons from like horror movies, like Cemetery Girls. And I remember this one woman was laughing. I had a class with her. This was later after I graduated high school. And I was wearing the shirt and it was a Givenchy shirt, right? And I cut the sleeves off and drew something on the back. Oh my God, you did that to a really expensive shirt. It's like, I bought it for $1 over at the DAV thrift store. It wasn't like an expensive shirt. And I thought the irony was funny that it was this, at that time, they used to always call designer clothing, and I was cutting up the sleeves and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting place. Like a Givenchy, I think, or one of the, or I forget who it was. I guess when you bought it from a store, it was an expensive shirt, but I got it for like $1 or something over at the thrift store. And we used to always go thrift store shopping, things like that. But also, yeah, so the early scene in Albuquerque were kind of interested in music, that kind of thing, underground stuff and all that. That was very hard to find because, thankfully for Paul, who owned Natural Sound, we found a lot of this music that you couldn't find anywhere else. You couldn't, except at Kmart. You could find Sex Pistols records and Ramon stuff at Kmart in the little bargain bin areas. But otherwise, a lot of the really, underground stuff, somehow Paul would find them and sell them at the store, and we'd go there. Oh, look, this came out. And at that time, that was really exciting. Paul started it out at Harvard. Then he moved it over to that Nob Hill thing on Carlisle, and this is way later, over at Carlisle and Central. And then he moved to the side. And then he had one for a little while up in the Ubake and Kendall area, the Eastdale for a while. But the main one, the really great one, was the one on Harvard. It was in an old house. I mean, the house was long been torn down, but it was a little house. And it was really great because there's a lot of stuff going on there. He was really great about bringing in people. Like I remember in 1984 when the Ramones played here again, he brought them in there for like a meet and greet before the show. And he was really cool because friends, certain friends of his, he would say, okay, don't go to the front door. Go to the back door, knock 3 times, and we'll get you in here. And before everybody else got in. So that was kind of cool, So that was the fun about it. I mean, what was it, 1980, one of the big shows, and you can ask myself, Kevin Cruikshank from Jerry's Kids, Gordy Anderson, all of us. The big show here, there was 2 of them that I would say that were monumental on the scene in Albuquerque, was in 1980, I believe it was, 999, a really great English band, played at the Chemo Theater, right? And a huge show. It was pretty good show, and that's kind of where we all first really started hanging out with the skaters from the Northeast Heights, the Kevins and and Brandon Moss, R.I.P. Those guys, they came down to that show. We all kind of met there, and I was part of that whole art scene with like Neo Boy and all these other guys, and so we all kind of met there, and that's kind of where everybody really kind of first met. Another show that was really big was this band from San Francisco called the Lewd, Lewd, played a show. They liked it so much here because it was this weird party over. It was where Dave Duran from Jerry's Kids' house, and people were getting mohawks and stuff, and they thought we were like a lot of fun. So they wrote about it in Maximum Rock and Roll, and then consequently, a lot of bands were like, well, we always just sort of drive through Albuquerque. But now let's see if we can get a show set up there because we heard how crazy it was. And sure enough, people like Mitzi, who, my friend Mitzi, we used to call her Mitzi DeGrungy. She lived in the old B&M Locksmith, which was over on 4th Street in my neighborhood in Brelis. And it was an old locksmith place. She lived there, and then she'd have bands there. It was a great, safe place. Joey Avon had a lot to do with booking shows there. And we started having a lot of traffic through here. We started having way more shows. It was a safe place. You can go there. Cops rarely ever bothered us there just because like at that time, Brelis, there weren't any cops that would come to the neighborhood. And then we also had the old firefighters club, which has also been torn down. And that was a great place because the firefighters let us do shows there. That was a really, really cool venue. As a matter of fact, the back doors would open because behind the band, the back doors would open. You could see downtown behind the bands. And there was nothing around because it was right next to Presbyterian Hospital. So at night, nobody lived in that immediate area. So you can have music all you wanted and all that. Nobody cared. Nobody complained about all the cussing and spitting and all that. And so but the lewd really, oh, and also, excuse my ADHD, but one of the big things about the 999 show was they recorded a live album called The Biggest Tour in Sport, because they had an album before that called The Biggest Prize in Sport, which is a good album. And then they did the live thing, and they showed this. We were all excited. Just everybody I know bought a copy of it. And on the record, the LP cover, it had a map of the United States, and Albuquerque was one of the stops, and they had it on there. So we were all like, "Oh my God, look!" And so that also was a big help for bands to think, "Well, if 999 played there, So that was when they started getting shows there, and then and then when the Lewd played, and I think that was like 1981, 82, somewhere. I'm not sure. They're not too far after the 999 show. They liked it so much here that they wrote about it. They wrote about their tour in Maximum Rock and Roll, but most of what they talked about was how insane Albuquerque was. The people in Albuquerque were nuts. There were these crazy people that were jumping off things the original slam dancers here from Albuquerque, if you want to call it that. We'd go to other shows like up in Denver or something and just lay waste to the place. Myself, Mike Prothero, Baron Wells, all these guys, and got a lot of respect in Phoenix. And when like Jerry's Kids toured through Phoenix and Tucson on this one tour, they opened for Social Distortion, and we got to meet those guys and ran amok in both Phoenix and Tucson was actually a really cool place. They were like very friendly, and Tucson was a lot like Albuquerque, both in size and the scene was cool. Phoenix was a lot of Nazi skinhead jerks and all that stuff, but they were terrified of us. When we showed up, they were like, we were like these brown guys from Albuquerque, man. They were like scary looking dudes, and they didn't want any part. And that was over at the Mad Gardens, which is a great club there. It was in a strip mall kind of thing, but it was actually a professional wrestling rink, and the bands played in the ring, and they had like what do you call it, chain links, because people throw stuff on this, so they'd play this. So we were like climbing up on the thing, jumping into the crowd, up the links, the like 20-foot high fence basically, and all that. So we made a tradition, we made a big stink everywhere we went. Then we go to skate competitions in California and stuff, and all the skaters liked us because everybody, like the skaters from here were insane because they'd bomb things like Big Bear, which is behind that one big theater. It's huge. Tony Alva saw it one time and was saying, "No, nobody skates that thing." And Kevin just ripped it, and they were just like, "Wow." So that's where Albuquerque got that first reputation of being a bunch of psychos in the desert, that do crazy crap. When I was living in New York for a while, in '84, there was a lot of people there. I would talk to these guys and see all the guys that lived in Manhattan and all that were really jealous of us because we can go out, shoot guns out in the West Mesa, ride a horse, do this, that, go out and they dreamed of that. So I knew guys like
the Wild West.
Yeah, they did. They thought we were a bunch of cowboys and stuff. And I may have, overemphasized that part of our lives, but a friend of mine from this band called Cause for Alarm, Chris Cherokee, him and this other guy, Booby, who's this crazy Russian guy that was he used to be a bodyguard for like Mick Jagger and stuff. Big, not very tall guy, but just wide dude. And they loved us. They loved the idea so much they actually moved here. They ended up in Taos, and I just saw me Stigma when they played here the other day, and we were talking about Cherokee and he had passed away a while back. So that's the first time I saw Vinny Stigma since Chris died, and so we were both kind of mourning him because he was he was a really cool guy. He was a crazy Polish guy, man. He was just nuts, and he'd always call himself the crazy Polak. He would always call himself, and he was a lot of fun. And he lived here for a while, then moved up to Taos, and became like I think like some sort of like Zen guru type guy up there. And I don't know whatever happened to Booby. I think he's still up in Taos, maybe. But 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 we had this great like, what do you call it, reputation of being just psychos out here, out drink people, because we'd go to LA, and there's a truth to the thing that you can, if you're from a really high area and you go to a very low area at sea level, you can drink everybody under the table. I could already drink people under the table here. So over there, it was even worse. We were at this place called Stanley's, which was this weird bar all these guys that lived in the San Fernando Valley would hang out at for happy hour. And so they would buy me drinks to see how many drinks I could drink. And I'm sitting there drinking all this stuff and stone cold sober. And they're like, thought that was crazy. And so it was great. Yeah. So you go to all these different places, you'd outdo them in so many various ways. And then they thought everybody from Albuquerque were like punk rock Superman or something, you know. So that was cool. That was great.
That's
you know.
great.
And I of course,
what a good story.
Oh yeah. And that was the thing, is that we didn't do anything to dissuade them from thinking that.
Nope,
That we wanted to. And people come here and they would see this, what was going on and all that, and we'd have nuts that we'd hang out with. And you interviewed Tommy. He was one of the younger guys that also started up, that tradition, because he was a pretty tough guy. And so, all these people that not are just my generation, the old party Vikings, but then like those younger guys, they kept that going as well. And so for many, many years, Albuquerque had this really great reputation of being crazy psycho place. You don't know what's going to happen next. Oh my God. I remember, what was it? Mike from, Mike Burkett, Fat Mike from, what do you call it? That one band. Anyway, he's an old buddy. He would just talk about, man, every time we fucking come to Albuquerque, there's something weird going on. Because they came here, they weren't even playing a show, and there was these stupid Nazi skinheads from New Jersey showed up. They got their ass whooped at this show we were doing down at the Towers. I forget who was playing. I think it was Green Day or something. It was something weird like that when they first started. And they ended up getting pretty, and then the cops showed up and then ran them out of town. And so, but every time, these guys would come into town, they would I knew a lot of guys that would just say, man, every time we come here, it's crazy. The Guar guys thought that about Albuquerque. That's the most insane place they ever played. So all these different bands would come through. They liked playing here, but then they were always freaked out about being here because, unfortunately, I think like TSOL or somebody got and more than one time got their trailer stolen off of their van. They had all their equipment or something like that. So bad parts of Albuquerque, sometimes kind of overcast the good parts of Albuquerque. So that was unfortunate. I know that a couple of different bands got a lot of stuff stolen from them like that, and that was an unfortunate. But then I was like, well, didn't you guys have anybody in the van watching the stuff? No, we never thought of that. Maybe you should. People steal stuff
from LA, and they come to Albuquerque.
Yeah, some of them will TSOL from LA. Yeah, and a lot of these guys were on tour. They only had, they had just very minimum equipment in a little trailer they rented from U-Haul in the back of their touring van, and that crap would get stolen, and they'd be screwed for the rest of the. A lot of times they could borrow equipment from somebody, like a local band and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of. I think one or two bands ended up having to go home because of that crap. I mean, it wasn't just a one-time isolated incident. That was kind of a very common problem here.
And this is
Uh,
early 80s and beyond.
Early to mid '80s. Yeah, a lot of this was happening, but I think people started understanding that this happened. That this just didn't happen to Albuquerque, but Albuquerque seemed to have its more than fair share of ripoffs like that, which sucked because we didn't appreciate that, and nobody that I know would have done anything like that. It was some asshole that wanted to crack money or something and figure out how to take the trailer off the thing and put it on the back of their truck or something and take off with it. So that was an unfortunate circumstance. But a lot of times I still see some guys here and there. And so is Albuquerque still as crazy as it was? It was like, kind of. But it's safe now because we have launch pads and then the Ren's Den and all these places that are safe. We have a lot of good shows coming through and all that. But it's not the same as when it was like very, do it yourself and they play in a place you didn't know if the cops were going to bust it and catch everybody drinking and all that. So
It
it
wasn't as
lost a
safe.
little bit of a pop
It
story.
was more dangerous when it was a house party, where at least now if you have a launch pad, it's controlled.
Yeah, it's a controlled area. They can even have all ages shows in the back and all that. And think my buddy Joe Anderson, who owns the place, now he runs that. He runs El Rey. He runs Inside Out. He runs the Sunshine. And he's getting some really good shows here. And Joe goes back a long, long ways. And he's always been a great catalyst for getting bands here now. But you know what I mean? Compared to the old days when it was really, really dangerous to have shows, and even the first days of Launchpad, it was still kind of iffy because the cops, they were trying to find any way they could to shut the place down, even though it was an established.
Was it the first days of the launch pad, or does downtown Albuquerque just go up and down? Sometimes it's better than others.
Yeah, but now it's a pretty safe bet, and I worked security there for a long time at Launchpad and ran the front door. And the good thing about seeing this is Joe Anderson. Bands would come in and they would say, "Oh my God, I'm so glad we're here because we went and played in Phoenix at a place I won't mention, and the promoter ripped them off. They got fed like bad Domino's pizza and all that. And Joe would always make sure that they met all the parts of the contract, and also Mike Bobroff had a little hand in that as well. And when we had this place called the Blackbird, and I forget what it was before that, but there was this really great restaurant down the street. We'd send them to. They'd get fresh food that was like not a pizza. And it would be coming, but I can't tell you how many times bands would come in. They'd say, "Oh my God, I'm so glad we're here. We're at Launchpad. Joe Anderson's not going to rip us off. We know that you're going to run a cool crew that aren't a bunch of meathead jerks that are going to beat up kids, except for maybe Guttermouths, which they can kiss my butt. But like they understood that things were really ran, and like the people that worked there were either musicians or were big fans of music, including the door guys and the bouncers and everything else, to where there wasn't like, oh, let's just throw this guy out because he looks funny, none of that stuff. So that's the great thing about the Launchpad. To this day, it's still that way. That it's well ran. Bands get paid what they need to get paid. Nobody's getting ripped off. They know that if they have ink with Joe Anderson, it's a done deal, and they're not, because on either side of Albuquerque, north, south, west, east, in different cities, that doesn't happen. So that's one good thing we have. And of course, there's that 8-hour rule about you drive 8 hours, you end up in Albuquerque from Phoenix or from Denver, or 12 hours or more from Austin, or 4 hours from El Paso. So you kind of have to stop here anyway. Well, let's do a show and let's make some gas money, if nothing else, right? So
Yeah,
that's one advantage. Yeah, we've always had that since going back to the 80s, the early 80s. That, well, we got to stop there anyway, do something and make a little money, So that's always been our little crossroads thing, for us. So that's helped us. But so awesome part about living here is that the bands play here that they wouldn't play like if it wasn't 8 hours from a major metropolitan area. And so what else?
Encourage them to come.
Oh yeah, and so it's a good safe bet to have bands here, or at least smaller touring acts. So that's always good. and we have a variety of places and different sizes and all. So that helps too.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, so that's why I don't ever have any. I mean, I own my house here, and I don't plan on moving anywhere. And I've been other places, and now it's kind of back here, and I'm like, I like here. Screw it. I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm done. I'm living here. They're going to carry me out of my house, boots first. So, but yeah, and so then being in a band myself, I got to play with some really great acts that I liked. So, and I've always been kind of choosy about what we did. We never just like would play with, okay, let's play. No, we're not going to play. We're going to play it most once a month, if that. And it's got to be something that we're really interested in, either playing with bands, local bands that we like, or a touring act that we like. Whether it's the Meatmen or the Mentors or, this is after Gigi Allen died, but the Murder Junkies or, I had a really good friend of mine from LA. And he has a band called Punk Bunny. I don't know if you ever heard of these guys, but they come with a CD and they perform on stage, and they really don't have music but they do dance around in like little Golda Meir panties and stuff like that. So we played with them a number of times. That's one of my favorite bands to play with. It's like that, and so being an old scum rock guy, I kind of appreciate that, and being in a band that can play with those kind of guys. But yeah, so that's a great part of it. And we've had a lot of bands that came through here that we said, well, yeah, we want to play with those guys. Oh, okay, let's play with it. So yeah, it's been nice. I really love playing with the Meatmen because I've been a fan of Tesco V forever, and they're pretty obnoxious. And that's and then that's my idea why I got into punk rock, because it was the most obnoxious thing at the time. You could be a big dick and just say, well, hey, I'm a punk. That's why I do this. It's in the contract. So that's why I like, the whole punk rock thing at the beginning was because of a weird act that did songs that are about having sexual relationships with animals or whatever. Like even there are a lot of old bands from New York, like Wayne/Jane County. Big fan of it. I've also loved the whole drama of dressing up and that kind of thing. I've worn some pretty outrageous things on stage, diapers, like I dressed like Goldilocks on a show, and the rest of the band dressed like really bad versions of bears. I'm sure we did with Damned, that kind of thing.
It's performance art.
Oh yeah, it is, and that's what I come from a theater degree background, so that's kind of what I'm really into. If I just went up on regular, street clothes, I just would feel like I'm denigrating my art, as we call it. That's the thing that I do miss about like the late 70s here in Albuquerque, is because we would have things like this thing they used to do called fashionism at the old, what was that called? Club Rec, REC. And that was in a big garage in the back of a house down off of South Broadway. And with Brian Green and those guys owned it or like lived in it. And then when they'd move out, somebody else would take it over and all this. And it was a combination of like art, from different underground artists, musicians, some like performance art, even like clothes people would have like on mannequins, whatever it was, and it just like a multimedia thing before this. And then they would show experimental films that maybe Genevieve Sprinkle would make, all those things like that. And that was a lot of fun. See, and that to me is what I enjoyed the most, not just going to see a band and sitting there, but having these all these different experiences going on at once. And I miss that. And I would love for people to start doing that again. But with the internet and all that, it's not as really over the top as it used to be. Now people are kind of a little bit jaded. So you really have to work on it to make it something really, really weird.
Hard to shock
weird
people these days.
It is, really is. And, or even just like the experience of, but once you do these things, when you see this live versus like some crappy YouTube video, it's an amazing event, and I think that people need to really consider that more often, get my friend Leo Gonzalez from State Gold, and he's been in bands and stuff. He's an amazing artist. I'd love to talk to him one of these days because he does a lot of like Lovecraftian art. He was heavily influenced by my friend Rick Sloan, who did like Sickle the Clown, these kind of things. And they were friends with Rick, and they collaborated on a lot of stuff together. And I just saw him the other day, and we talked. But that's the kind of thing I think we need back. A long time ago, we did fetish shows, that kind of thing. So, and there's all that stuff still around, but they're all kind of like compartmentalized.
Go back, compartmentalized. It's all connected. Everybody got influenced each
Well, yeah,
other.
I mean, there's all these things that people do. There might be an art show somewhere, okay, but just an art show. There might be a burlesque show, but it's just a burlesque show. And not just a burlesque, but it's a single entity. It's a burlesque show. Nothing else. You'll have bands play. Just the bands. It'd be nice to see somebody try to actually combine these things into one time off event, having burlesque dancers with bands and people doing their art and maybe doing live art projects as they speak, that kind of thing. And that may be the person that can get that together, maybe.
That would be
But
fantastic.
because when you just go to see a band, you're seeing a band. And honestly, I've seen so many bands in my life that unless it's somebody, Scared of Chocolate came through a while back, and so I had to go down to see my friend Dave, who I used to play in the Wads with. Left Unsaid, who were the young guys, who now are older guys. They did a one-off show. That was great, and it was packed and all that. But otherwise, it's really hard for me to get excited about a show. I've seen these guys about 10 times already, and they're kind of on the, they're my age or something, and they're kind of going downhill and whatever, some touring acts.
Where did Albuquerque get
So
that mix of arts? Is that like a university and a New Mexico and just?
there were, I think there were a lot of UNM students. The Generics, this one band who had offshoots like with Judson, False Prophets. Some of the guys played with, like Bruce, their drummer, played with the False Prophets. No, Gross Prophets. False Prophets, another band from New York. Anyway, the Gross Prophets. So it was like this, but these people are also multifaceted. Some of these guys were also filmmakers. They were artists, and then they knew other artists like Rick or somebody else. And so they would bring stuff in. And Terry Corbin, who used to be married to Rick, she was like this fetish artist that would do stuff. Cynthia Cook, who's a friend of mine, she did a lot of things like that. There was this great, my friend Bob Ramirez, who we call Neo Boy. He did a lot of these things. So all these people that were just like sort of like from different worlds would just get together because of their love for underground art of various forms. Would get together and just every once in a while, hey, let's do something at Club Rec. And then they had this space that was a fairly safe space because nobody really cared if they did at the back of that house on Arnaud. And so, and there were other places that we did things, but for those kind of multimedia things, it was, I think, if you're going to say one group of people had been the Generics, and John O'Jones, if he sees this, he's a friend of mine. He doesn't live here anymore, but he could speak to that better than I could, because I was just some big dumbass that would sort of show up and, hey, this looks like fun, That was a really interesting time here, like the late 70s. There wasn't anything going on like that except maybe some places like in New York or like downtown LA or something. And other places didn't have this really great combination of artists that did things like that. It was really, really cool.
New Mexico's always been a mecca for artists, and apparently just is on all different levels. It's fantastic.
Yes. Oh yeah.
It's great.
And we had a lot of really great underground artists that did some great work. So I miss that. I don't see that happening as much now. And maybe it is. I'm just not cognizant of it. But I kind of keep my ear out and hopefully that can be done again. Maybe I have to talk to Joe about the dates. But yeah, so that I sorely miss that kind of the old Albuquerque scene that was mostly art driven rather than music or whatever. and those artists consequently had such great ability that all of a sudden they say, "Oh, I'm going to pick up the guitar and see if I can play." Hey, I'll play guitar. So they would, so then they'd form bands and then they would do this and that. So that's where a lot of that came from in the '70s here. That's missed, I feel.
That's good information.
But yeah, oh yeah, and yeah, I missed that. And then like the hardcore thing started up, and a lot of those people didn't want to go. I was thinking of my friend Harry Morris, like this very strange, very nervous guy, and he's 70 something now. I mean, he graduated high school in '69, so you can do the math. I remember he was at a show and somebody jumped on top of him, and I had to throw them off, and he, so he's got really nervous, and so he doesn't really like to go to things like that anymore. So, and it got too loud and too aggressive for a lot of these guys, So that's kind of what kind of messed things up as well. And I was part of it. I was part of it, but
not
I was
everybody
also part
likes
of that
those
scene too.
shows.
Yeah, it's and you understand it's not for everybody, and fortunately so, because otherwise, then it loses any kind of credibility. I feel. If you got if you got a band that's playing at a big venue, I don't like big venue shows.
No, not when you get to see what you get to see.
And I think the last big venue show I did was like last year. We went to the Cure. Was it that? I've only been to that, the pavilion or whatever there one time, the big outdoor amphitheater. And that was, but and then I saw Alice Cooper at the Rio Grande Event Center. That was the 2 shows. Was
Alice Cooper influence on your generation?
Oh, huge influence. Well, oh yeah, because when I was younger, before there was a punk rock, I was into bands like I was into David Bowie a lot, Iggy Pop. Obviously, Alice Cooper, I was a huge fan. I was a member of the Black Widow fan club and everything. And it's because, they were different. Nobody was doing that. They were very, very, at their time, that was some of the most controversial stuff out there. And this was like early 70s, 74, when they were putting out $1 Billion Babies and that kind of thing. When David Bowie was still Ziggy Stardust, and then he became the Thin White Duke, and the most bizarre looking man on the planet. I mean, nobody really looks like him even to this day. When he was Ziggy Stardust, I mean, who looks like that, now? Nobody can really copy that, And then I hated bands like Kiss because I thought they was just kind of a cornball clown thing. So I never liked Kiss, even though most guys my age liked them so much. But
Alice Cooper fans are loyal forever. Alice Cooper fans are loyal forever. It's just so important to anyone who loves performance art.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of his shows that I saw when I was younger, mid '70s, were some of the most bizarre, huge things that you would just see. Like for a big show, he would have guillotines on stage, and he would have dancers that were dressed like skeletons, and I mean, he did a whole like Broadway thing, with him, and that was amazing. And like the watered down version of him to me is like Rob Zombie, because he does sort of the same thing, but it's
you can tell, you can trace it all back to Alice Cooper. He was, yeah. If you love music history, which I do, and performance art, Alice Cooper fans are loyal forever.
Oh yeah, I still am a huge Alice Cooper fan. I still have records of his and stuff. And then going back even further, the 50s was like Screaming Jay Hawkins. Some of the stuff he did was just really out there. And this is in the 50s. Then in the 70s, you'd have Screaming Lord Sutch. I don't know if you ever heard. He was like a great, did songs about Jack the Ripper and all that. And he would wear a top hat, So there are these, I mean, Alice Cooper was the child of them, basically, but he was the one that really brought it out, and he was such a theatrical person that he could really make it work, Screaming Jay Hawkins, like I think he was at one time, Screaming Jay Hawkins originally was an opera singer, and then he just listened to rock and roll, and he's like, hey, and he's the one who did Put a Spell on You and Little Demon and all these other songs, Constipation Blues, which was a really, controversial song when it came out, that kind of thing. And the Screaming Lord Sutch was the same way, and he was very theatrical. I've always loved theatrics, and then of course like New York Dolls when they came out. I got the second record they put out. And of course, then from that, I discovered the first record. And this is like 73, 74,
Wow.
when I was very young. But I was into that even then because my older brother and older sister they liked the Beatles. My brother was more of like a Elton John guy, but uh, because of their influence, I listened to stuff. But then I had my own. I was a very morbid kid because in the '60s I would watch Scooby Doo, Where Are You? This show called Johnny Quest. Where they'd have actual deaths in the show, and
The
then there was
original Johnny Quest.
oh yeah, the original Johnny Quest, The
Okay.
Adventures of Johnny Quest. When people would die, in horrible ways, and be fed to like Komodo dragons or various other ways. And then there was actually a soap opera called Dark Shadows that I became a huge uh, fan of Barnabas Collins. Then they did that horrible movie, but Burton did a movie about it. But the original soap opera I used to watch as a kid, and it was fascinating. And the funny thing is, at the time, being 5, 6 years old, found it terrifying. And now you watch it, it's kind of comedic because they did it live, and there was people flub lines left and right, and they would find somebody would be sitting in there, and the script would be open on camera, sitting next to them. But at the time, I found it terrifying, and Barnabas Collins was one of my big. And Vincent Price were my childhood heroes in the '60s. I loved all those Roger
Yeah.
Corman horror movies.
Yeah.
And so those things were the same things that friends of mine like Rick Sloan, who are much older than myself, or Harry Morris, grew up on as well. And that's where we had that relationship where I was like 14 years old, hanging out with people that were 30 years old, and but spoke the same language,
In
and back
art,
in the
in
mid
art
70s, yeah,
language. Oh,
Oh
that's
yeah, definitely. That kind of thing. And also, my birthday's right before Halloween, so of course, all that stuff kind of combined to make who I am. I mean, I drive everybody nuts because I'm a total fall nut.
yeah,
Pumpkin
I think
spice,
it's
unapologetic pumpkin
fun.
spice fan.
It's fun.
I love the month of October is my favorite month, beyond a doubt. Uh, and I've always been that way. Uh, Forever. 60 years, 61 years. I'm 61 years now, and I came out of the womb screaming Dracula or something.
Is it the
Uh,
fall stuff
but
or the horror stuff or both?
all of it, Halloween,
All of
the
it.
weather in fall, the foods in fall, the drinks in fall. Every year I drive my significant other Sarah. That's by having to find pumpkin spice flavored things at Trader Joe's and that kind of. And I'll buy every pumpkin related thing I can. I've taken pictures of myself with my shopping cart full of pumpkin spice, toaster pastries and this and that and
Exactly. It's like a big
chips
tough
and
guy who's
whatever,
got
anything I could
pumpkin
find.
candles
Yeah.
everywhere. That's great.
Oh yeah, and I have all. As a matter of fact, I just bought the other day some pumpkin scented cologne that I really
Oh yeah.
like. I spray it on the comb and comb it through my goatee in the morning, so that way, smell it. And I have 3 huge bottles of the Bath and Body Works Sweet Pumpkin Spice body spray. And I don't go over no, it's not like everybody has
No,
to
but
walk
you
down
just love it.
up wind of me or anything. But I'll spray a little bit here and there. Just enjoy
Well,
that.
don't you
Yeah,
like
and I have
paranormal psychology too, or what are your
oh yeah,
hobbies?
paranormal. Yeah, I'm a paranormal investigator.
Yeah.
I've done some really fun things with different groups. A lot of really great locations. Found findings. I don't like to say evidence. Evidence to me equates to something you could take to court and say, "Look, this is what happened." But if it's an experience you've had or something, you say, "Well, that's hearsay." But I've done things, recorded things, I've seen things I can't easily explain. I like to keep a skeptical mind, but there are things that I can't explain. One of the greatest things, a friend of mine, Candace, recorded once in her hotel room at this great place up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, called the Plaza Hotel. It's a great old 1880s hotel, right? A lot of history, a lot of things happened there. We're in her room. She's recording something, and she listens back to it, and it's this guy with great remorse in his voice saying, "I've got to get myself to church." I was the only guy in the room at the time. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. Nobody was walking by lamenting about anything. And it's funny because you hear that and you think, well, if this is a dead person, why is he saying I got to get myself to church? Things like that. So I've taken pictures of things where shadows of something of that shouldn't be there. We've had a few recordings. A little girl's voice in a closed room singing Frère Jacques, the little French, you know, song. A question from another little girl somewhere else asking, "Who are you?" No
Who
little
are
girl
you?
around in the guy. So yeah, it's things like that, and you can't explain it because, or to me, you can't explain it away that easily because there are no children around. There was no guy lamenting his life going by saying, "I got to get myself to church at 2 o'clock on a Saturday morning." Things like that. You say, well, so and that's what keeps me going doing that. I'm
Oh,
planning on doing a YouTube, and I need to get my butt because my friend Candace is like, this isn't one of these things that's going to fizzle, right? Kind of is fizzling right now, so I got to kick myself in the ass. Right now, I'm going to have the rest of the summer off, have plenty of time. I have some really great people, like my friend. I'll just call it Ruby because she didn't use that name on Facebook, and I don't want to say her real name on camera.
fair enough.
She's my partner on that. We're working on that, so we got to get our butts together, and she'll agree with me on this. Butts and gear, not butts together. I think butts together. That's a whole
Close
other
enough.
video.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so and do that because that's one of the things I've been because of Scooby Doo. I mean, as a child, I was fascinated with haunted locations and all that. And that's never gone away. That childlike fascination, and especially every once in a while catching something that I can't easily explain. And you say, okay. And, if you tell a lot of people, it's probably the wind or it was whatever, it was a TV on in the back. No, it wasn't. But I'm not going to argue with it because I like to be skeptical about things like myself. But I like to go through things and say, okay, could have been this. No, it wasn't that. Was this? No, no, no. And then you go through all these possibilities and you say, okay, I understand, what's
It
up.
seems
So,
obvious to
yeah, so
me.
that's my today. What's that?
Recorded a podcast with someone who told me there was 51,000 casualties and deaths on the Battle of Gettysburg, on the battlefields of Gettysburg. All of those and spirits have to go somewhere, and maybe they're trying to find their way to
Oh yeah,
church or
that's the
whatever.
thing. Yeah, there's areas I've been to the battlefield, and
Really, me
it's
too.
amazing. And
It's
you do get a feeling there. Uh, well, there's a rock, and I can't remember the Sniper's Rock or something like that. I went to. It's a famous location there, and there's been a lot of really great, well documented photos taken there that have been looked at and that are really amazing. And I've been to that rock, and it's really, really, I forget what it was called. Is it a ridge or a rock? I don't know what they call it, but it's a big rock, basically.
have the
The
same
town, the
fascination with the
house where that girl
past.
got shot. Yeah. So yeah, and I love history. I'm a big history buff. So consequently, all this kind of combines,
I
including the
totally
history of
agree.
places like that.
What other
And in New Mexico, we
buildings?
have so much. What's
That's
that?
just what other buildings? You're talking about that hotel in Las Vegas. I can't imagine the
Oh
buildings you
yeah,
have to get exploring.
places that I feel that I've found to be spiritually active, I guess if you want to call it that. The plaza would be way up there. There's other places like what's called the Eklund Hotel in Clayton. It's an old, really cool old hotel. The St. James in Cimarron. There's a couple of different places you can go out. There's been a couple of different cemeteries I've been to
Oh, wow.
that and it's not like, oh, I'm amongst a bunch of dead people. Like,
No,
no, it's
no.
just there's something there. I've been to cemeteries, very old cemeteries, cemetery, but I've been to other cemeteries where, like, man, there is something here. And I hate to be ethereal and all that, but something's going on, and then you catch something moving, try to catch it and all that.
You went to Highland High School. Do you hang out at the graveyard?
Oh yeah, we used to go down to the park. Yeah, the park. Window. Yeah, the one on Yale. Yeah. Oh yeah, we did a great thing. I was with some friends of mine. We're all dressed like Droogs from Clockwork Orange, the white and the hat and all that. And there were some kids out there drinking. So we walk up on them, and talking in that set, which was the language. This is really nerdy when you think about it now, but at the time we thought we were badass.
Yeah.
Wearing our droopy clothing and all this, and walked up to him, and my friend Mike goes, "What's up? What are you doing?" or something. And they freaked out. They ran, and they thought, I don't know what they thought, but they scared them. They left trails as they ran away and all this. So we used to go hang out there. I knew a guy who passed away, and I really was mad at him because he stole somebody's gravestone from there, and I think that's highly uncool. And and it's funny because he had it in this room, and I thought it was really, and then it started freaking him out really bad, and he ended up having to take it back, and which I was glad he did. And I was like, well, don't do that anymore. And then somebody else I knew stole a baby's headstone, and I really got mad. It really angered me as a Catholic. We put stock in like leaving the graves of people alone. Anytime I've ever been in a graveyard, anything like that, I never made a mess. I didn't leave garbage behind. I left it the way I found it. Same thing with haunted locations. Same thing with older areas that you'd find pottery shards. You leave it there. All these things like I've been through. You always do that, and I found it highly disrespectful. And I really disliked the people that did that. Lost friendships over that. I didn't think it was cool. I would never do that. So I didn't even like leaving footsteps, places.
Do you come from pretty traditional Catholic family?
Yeah, and we do. And my whole family is Catholic. My dad was a Southern Baptist, but he converted to Catholicism. I was even a Knight of Columbus for a while. I was never like an altar boy or anything else. And the experiences I've had in the Catholic Church in my neighborhood, Sacred Heart, have been nothing but very positive, or Cristo Rey in Santa Fe, because they were also cultural hubs of this, like the Cristo Rey in Santa Fe, for instance, on Upper Canyon Road, where my mom got married and they went to mass and all that. They'd also show movies. They'd have outreach to everybody else. There was no priest that I knew of diddling kids. And the people that I knew, the guys that I grew up in the South Valley and Umbrellas and all that, if a priest tried to touch you when you were 12 years old, they'd smack them and then punch them in the face. I think it's, I don't know, and I think I would laugh. I would be laughing so hysterically if somebody came on to me like that. We were pretty streetwise, so it's like, get out of here. Wouldn't hold it in and wouldn't say 20 years later, oh my God, priest put a finger on my butt, whatever. So, I want to brought up. And I think street smarts is one of the best things you can have. But so, I mean, so my experience of the Catholic Church may not be everybody's experience. I wasn't forced to go to mass. We just did it. It was what we did on Sundays. And we go there, we have breakfast afterwards and go home, whatever. But that was just something we did. It was part of life. An hour out of the month, a week,
Do you have like 100 cousins?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of Santa Fe. I have a lot.
Really?
My uncles and all and aunts are all passing away, but you have a ton of, there were 7 kids and they all had kids. Yeah, I have quite a few cousins on my mom's side of the family. I don't really know the cousins that much on my dad's side.
You said your mom was from New Mexico?
You're from Santa Fe.
From Santa Fe. Oh, a big family
there. Yeah. So, and then we moved down here because, work and all that for my dad. She worked at a credit union. My dad was a pipe fitter. So that's why we lived here. Well, most of my other family lived up in Santa.
Where'd you live when you went to Highland?
I lived over kind of near Washington.
Sorry, say that again. Near
what? Near Washington and Lomas, kind of just north of the school.
Okay.
And that's where I lived at that time. I lived a long time in the Southeast Heights when I went to Whittier and all that. And then we moved and I went to Jefferson Middle School. My first school was Armijo, which was in the South Valley. That was the first school.
What year was that?
This is a 69, I guess.
What year you said you were born? 63?
69. I was born in 63, and I think I started school in 68, 69, that year, that school year. And I started school when I was 5 years old because I turned 6 during the school year. But that's when I started elementary. And that was great. And then it's funny because I've worked at that school and I was subbing for a while. And it's so weird to go. And now I teach at Highland.
You teach
and
at
it's a
Highland
really
now?
weird. I teach there now.
Really?
I teach special ed. Yeah, I love it, but it's very weird because there's a lot of alumni there, and they all graduated like in the '90s up, and so like uh,
You're
I'm
the
like the
old
old man.
wise professor?
Yeah, I mean there are teachers that are older than me, but but not alumni teachers. I'm the oldest by far as far as the alumni goes
What's Highland like these
because I went there.
days?
It's really mellow. First off, it's tiny. There's only about 1,100 students, and it's a really mellow school. There's not a lot of fights on campus. Kids are really nice. They're really respectful. They're really friendly. They're really good to I'm a special ed teacher, so I'm Papa Hen or Papa whatever, Smurf or whatever to my guys, and but so I'm very uh, protective of them. Well, the kids at Highland are really friendly towards my guys. They make friends with them. They're really cool. It's a really weird place to be now because when I went there was a lot of drugs. There's a lot of gatherings and this and that. Jump on, we go off campus, go get drunk, and go steal booze from the Walgreens, and all that. People getting high, and there's not really that issue at Highland now. It's pretty nice, and it's funny because it's primarily the war zone school because we've lost a lot of, and this is one of the reasons it's such a small school. Is first off, you can transfer to any school you want to in Albuquerque now with no penalties. And so people go to all these other different schools, and but like we're predominantly the war zone school. I'm a district program, so I can have kids from other parts of the town, but as far as like Highland goes, yeah, it's just the southeast area for the most part. The kids at Z Elementary, the closest elementary to Highland, they all go to Albuquerque High.
It's weird.
Yeah, and the only feeder schools are Hayes, Wilson, and Van Buren, as far as the middle school goes. So but the kids are cool. Even though they come from, and everybody, oh my God, it's the war zone school. Yeah, these are great kids. These are kids, that are, come from a disadvantaged situation and all that, but actually you have them in your class. They're very nice kids and no problems. And,
Would you attribute some of that to just the fact that it's less students? 700 students. When I went to Highland, it was 2,800 students.
I think when I was there at one point, we were like at 38 to 4,000.
Yeah, that's like
You go into the
overcrowding.
building and it was like, yeah, the late '70s and all. It was really bad. It was way overcrowded. If you showed up late to a class at the beginning of the school year, you didn't get a seat unless you were mean enough to make somebody get out of a seat. Otherwise you're standing in the back of the room.
Which in itself would make for less violent behavior amongst humans. Just to have less of them in a
And the
classroom.
kids and stuff, yeah, they're pretty cool. There's a fight every once in a great blue moon.
That sounds great.
And it's usually just two guys arguing over something. It wasn't like somebody got jabbed in the eye with an ice cube or ice pick or something.
Is that what happened in your day?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of straight razors. A lot of guys I knew carried straight razors. Cut somebody. That was a popular one. Straight razor in the shoe or your back pocket.
Damn.
That was the kind of stuff. But if you're cool and everyone's cool, that's fine. But I know, we had riots when I was there, where people got in two big groups and threw things at each other and all that. So that was a lot of fun. I was in the middle of that stuff. That was kind of that couldn't happen because you couldn't get two big groups of students at Albuquerque at Highland together like that because there'd be like 4 on this side and 6 on the other or something. It's a small school now. It's really weird. I worry about it too because I don't want the school to close down because it's that's my.
Oh, I think that's great to have. As a parent, I have to know less students in the classroom is easier on the teacher and all the kids.
Yeah, there's still a lot of classes though that have 30, 40 students in them.
Really?
I have friends of mine. I don't know because there's not that much variety, that many teachers as well. The smaller the population of a school, the smaller the faculty. So it's still kind of, I'm the only person that teaches what I teach at Highland. We only have one section of FCS3, we call it. So I'm it. Although my class
it goes
by
both
law
ways, huh?
small group. But yeah, so constantly like certain history classes and math classes. So,
That's
I mean, you still
awesome.
have those issues, but, you know, it just, yeah, you have a smaller faculty because of a smaller student
Yeah, it
population.
goes both ways. I should have guessed that part.
But at least but for the most part, you go in a classroom, you can find a seat. You don't have to sit in the back of the room, knock somebody else out of their desk,
Sure would be great
which
if
I
it
was
was
prone to
easier
do.
on teachers.
And the teachers we have, I think, are more concerned than when I went there. There's a lot of teachers that were checked out. So that's a good thing. But yeah, so anyway, that's my story for the most part. I don't know much else I can say. Albuquerque has always been kind of a very influential city when it comes to punk rock in a very odd way, not necessarily so much bands, except there are a few bands that got to be well known. But I think that Albuquerque's main strength as far as our scene goes is the scene itself, the people that I can think of over the years. And unfortunately, a lot of them have passed away, like my friend Ed and these other guys that, very unfortunate. And then a lot of people, of course, have moved away as well. Tommy, you jerk. And, but understandably so. You know, I had friends of mine that were raging addicts. They had to move away from it because they had too many connections here to what they wanted, and so they had to move to other cities to get away from it. So that's understandable in that situation. But yes, I miss the people that have either moved or no longer with us. But there are new people. You know, continues the life cycle of the scene still. Younger people come into it now, and the old farts like myself, I'd like to see that it's not dying anytime soon. So that's good. It may be a different crowd, it may be a different mindset, but it's still around. That's
Still around.
the joy, yeah. And I
All
like going to
right.
shows when you see like some younger kids that are into and they borrowed dad's GBH shirt or whatever and go to the show. And so that's kind of cool. At least they know who GBH is. So that's good. But yeah, so I'm glad that the music scene here is still healthy, and there's there's no lack of shows. There's no lack of things, and that certainly was a problem when I was you know in my teenage years. So and because even all these things that were going on, this only happened like maybe once every 3 or 4 months, and then there was just like we'd all hang out and watch TV somewhere or go to movies or something like that. So it's good that the kids have places to go and things to do.
As do the adults.
Yeah, and that's true because I still will go downtown every once in a while and have a
Heck
number of
yeah.
adult beverages and yell
Heck
at
yeah.
somebody on the street and
Did you go
still
see
think I'm a
Suicidal
badass.
Tendencies?
Who's that?
Did you go see Suicidal Tendencies?
I did not. It's hard for me to get away because I take care of my mom and I have to get a mom
Yeah.
sitter. And I don't think if I was teaching summer school, probably would have went. But I hate to say it, Suicidal is another one of those bands I've seen about 20 times.
It's just cool they came. It's cool they came.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, and I'm glad people got to see them,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
younger people. But yeah, it's one of those things where I've seen the guys several times and about 4 different
Yeah.
decades. So
And those were
you know.
great times. Those were great times.
Well, yeah, and so I'm glad the guy did it. And I almost went, but now I was just like, oh, man, they're hard. But
It's
next big
okay.
show, I'll go.
You keep
I'll make
working.
myself go to the next show just to keep up my punk rock credibility.
There we go. Well, just keep making music, making theater, changing the world.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna get a show. I was talking to the guys from my band, and we'll get something together September. I think we're no rush, but we want to find the right thing. We've never been in a rush to do a show because it's not like I have to play right now, but I want to do the right show at the right time, the right band, the gig whores I used to call them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Cool.
thank you for
Cool.
having me on the show. I appreciate it. This is fun. I'm
I'll
looking
have
forward to seeing the finished product.
thanks. Thanks. I'll have you back again and we can revisit some of these same topics.
Yeah, by that time, maybe my old adult brain will remember some
No,
other things because I know there was more things that happened in the last 60
it's
years
okay.
than what I've told you. But
No,
yeah,
just uh, that's why I'm just gonna keep recording. You guys keep talking and I'll keep recording.
oh, it sounds awesome.
All right.
Okay, well,
Take
thanks a
care,
lot.
Steve.